Welcome to the General Data Protection Regulation GDPR online course. Finally, Lesson 4 explores the duties of the data controller and the data processor. The lesson objectives are learning about the duties of the data controller while processing data. This lesson will help you to learn about the measures to protect patient data from unauthorized access breaches and cyber attacks, and learn how the processing of data works. Duties of the data controller. The controller, to be able to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the regulation, shall keep a record of processing activities for which they are responsible. Thus, this regulation is also part of the principle of accountability and compliance with the regulation. The controller is required to explain and justify the permissibility of the processing and bear the responsibility to demonstrate that it applies the prescribed principles under Article 24 to 25 GDPR. Implement appropriate technical and organizational measures such as pseudonymization of data, minimizing the processing of data, and transparency regarding data operations and processing. Keep a record of processing activities. Consider the application of security measures. They must notify data breaches. Consider the impact assessment of processing. Ask for a prior consultation. Consider the designation of a controller. Consider the adoption of codes of conduct and certification mechanisms. You can find additional information here. The processing register or record of processing activities. Content of the record for the controller. Under the General Data Protection Regulation, the controller is required to keep a record of processing activities. This record, often referred to as a processing register or record of processing activities, serves as an important accountability measure for organizations handling personal data. Here's an explanation of the requirements. 1. Purpose of the record. The record of processing activities is intended to provide an overview of the processing activities carried out by the controller. It helps demonstrate compliance with the GDPR's principles and obligations and facilitates transparency with data subjects and supervisory authorities. 2. Contents of the record. The record should contain specific information about the processing activities, including a. Control details. The name and contact details of the organization acting as a controller, including its representatives if applicable. Data Protection Officer. If the organization has an appointed DPO, their contact details should be included. Data Processing Purposes. A description of the purposes for which the personal data is being processed. This should be specific and clearly defined. Data Categories. The categories of personal data being processed, such as contact information, health data, or financial information. Data Subjects. The categories of individuals whose personal data is being processed, such as customers, employees, or patients. Recipients of the data. Any third parties or categories of participants with whom the personal data is shared, such as service providers or regulatory authorities. Data Transfers. If personal data is transferred to third countries or international organizations, a note of such transfers should be included. Retention Periods. The retention periods or criteria used to determine how long the personal data will be stored. And security measures. A description of the technical and organizational security measures implemented to protect the data. 3. Updates and accessibility. The record of processing activities should be kept up to date and reviewed regularly. It should be easily accessible to supervisory authorities upon request as part of their monitoring and enforcement activities. 4. Exceptions for small organizations are defined as those with fewer than 250 employees are generally exempted from maintaining a record unless the processing they carry out is likely to result in a risk to the rights and freedoms of data subjects, is not occasional, or involves special categories of data. Content of record for the processor. The processor who carries out the processing on behalf of the controller has the same obligation as the controller and follows the same rules and guidelines. Questionnaire. Please proceed to test your acquired knowledge with the following questionnaire. Thank you for participating in Module 7, Lesson 4.